everyone, and thank you again for joining me in the reading of Carl Rogers on Becoming a Person, a Therapist's View of Psychotherapy. We had started reading together quite some time ago and then took a pause, and so now we're back and continuing on in the process of becoming a person, a process conception of psychotherapy. And we are starting with on page 143 with examples of process in one area, and perhaps we will read until the middle of 147 or the top middle of 147, where it says self as an object tends to disappear. So perhaps we'll pause there and then continue on from next time. So here we go. Examples of process in one area. Since I have tended to speak as though the client as a whole is at one stage or another, let me stress again before going on to describe the next stage, that in given areas of personal meaning, the process may drop below the client's general level because of the experiences which are so sharply at variance with the concept of self. Perhaps I can illustrate from a single area in the feelings of one client something of the way the process I am describing operates in one narrow segment of experiencing. In a case reported rather fully by Sheelan, the quality of the self-expression in the interviews has been at approximately points 3 and 4 on our continuum of process. Then, when she turns to the area of sexual problems, the process takes up at a lower level on the continuum. In the 6th interview, she feels that there are things it would be impossible to tell the therapist. Then, after a long pause, mentions almost inaudibly an itching sensation in the area of the rectum, for which a physician could find no cause, end quote. Here, a problem is viewed as completely external to self. The quality of experiencing is very remote. It would appear to be characteristic of the second stage of the process as we have described it. In the 10th interview, the itching has moved to her fingers. Then, with great embarrassment, describes undressing games and other sex activities in childhood. Here, too, the quality is that of telling of non-self activities with feelings described as past objects, though it is clearly somewhat further on in the continuum of process. She concludes, because I'm just bad, dirty, that's all, end quote. Here is an expression about the self and an undifferentiated, rigid personal construct. The quality of this is that of stage 3 in our process, also, as is also the following statement about the self, showing more differentiation of personal meanings. Quote, I think inside I'm oversexed and outside not sexy enough to attract the response I want. I'd like to be the same inside and out, end quote. This last phrase has a stage 4 quality in its faint questioning of a personal construct. In the 12th interview, she carries this questioning further, deciding she was not just born to be promiscuous. This has clearly a 4th stage quality, definitely challenging this deep-seated way of constructing her experience. Also, in this interview, she acquires the courage to say to the therapist, quote, you're a man, a good-looking man, and my whole problem is men like you. It would be easier if you were elderly, easier, but not better in the long run, end quote. She is upset and embarrassed having said this and feels, quote, it's like being naked. I'm so revealed to you, end quote. Here, an immediate feeling is expressed, with reluctance and fear to be sure, but expressed, not described. Experiencing is much less remote or structure-bound and occurs with little postponement, but with much lack of acceptance. The sharper differentiation of meaning is clearly evident in the phrase, easier, but not better, quotes. All of this is fully characteristic of our stage 4 of the process. In the 15th interview, she describes many past experiences and feelings regarding sex, these having the quality of both the third and fourth stage, as well as we have presented them. At some point, she says, I wanted to hurt myself, so I started going with men who would hurt me with their penises. I enjoyed it and was being hurt, so I had a satisfaction of being punished for my enjoyment at the same time, end quote. Here is a way of construing experience which is perceived as just that, not as an external fact. It is also quite clearly being questioned, though this questioning is implicit. There is recognition of and some concern regarding the contradictory elements in experiencing enjoyment, yet feeling she should be punished. These qualities are fully characteristic of the fourth stage or even slightly beyond. A bit later, she describes her intense past feelings of shame at her enjoyment of sex. Her two sisters, the neat, respected daughters, could not have orgasms. Quote, so again, I was the bad one. Up to this point, this again illustrates the fourth stage. Then suddenly she asks, or am I really lucky? In the quality of the present expression of feeling of puzzlement, in the bubbling through quality, in the immediate experiencing of this wonderment, in the frank and definite questioning of her previous personal construct, this is clearly the qualities of stage 5, which we have just described. She has moved forward in the process in a climate of acceptance and very considerable distance from stage 2. I hope this example indicates the way in which an individual in a given area of personal meanings becomes more and more loosened, more and more in motion in process as she is received. Perhaps, too, it will illustrate what I believe to be the case, that this process of increased flow is not one which happens in minutes or hours, but in weeks or months. It is an irregularly advancing process, sometimes retreating a bit, sometimes seeming not to advance as it broadens out to cover more territory, but finally proceeding in its further flow. We're going to continue and go and do stage 6, or the beginnings of stage 6. So stage 6. If I have been able to communicate some feeling for the scope and quality of increased loosening of feeling, experiencing and construing at each stage, then we are ready to look at the next stage, which appears from observation to be a very crucial one. Let me see if I can convey what I perceived to be its characteristic qualities. Assuming that the client continues to be fully received in the therapeutic relationship, then the characteristics of stage 5 tend to be followed by a very distinctive and often dramatic phase. It is characterized as follows. A feeling which has previously been stuck, has been inhibited in its process quality, is experienced with immediacy now. A feeling flows into its full result. A present feeling is directly experienced with immediacy and richness. This immediacy of experiencing and the feeling which constitutes its content are accepted. This is something which is not something to be denied, feared, struggled against. All the preceding sentences attempt to describe slightly different facets of what is, when it occurs, a clear and definite phenomenon. It would take recorded examples to communicate its full quality, but I shall try to give illustrations without the benefit of recording. A somewhat extended excerpt from the 80th interview with a young man may communicate the way in which a client comes into stage 6. Example, quote, I can even conceive of it as a possibility that I could have a kind of tender concern for me. Still, how could I be tender, be concerned for myself, when they're one and the same thing? But yet I can feel it so clearly. You know, like taking care of a child. You want to give it this and give it that. I can kind of clearly see the purposes for somebody else, but I can never see them for myself. That I could do this for me, you know? it is possible that I can really want to take care of myself and make that a major purpose in my life. That means I'd have to deal with the whole world as if I were guardian of the most cherished and most wanted possession, that this I was between this precious me that I wanted to take care of and the whole world. It's almost as if I loved myself. You know, it's strange, but it's true. Therapist. It seems such a strange concept to realize. Why it would mean I would face the world as though a part of my primary responsibility was taking care of this precious individual who is me, whom I love, client, whom I care for, whom I feel so close to. Oof. That's another strange one. Therapist. It just seems weird. Client. Yeah, it hits rather close somehow. The idea of my loving me and taking care of me. His eyes grow moist. That's a very nice one. Very nice. The recording would help to convey the fact that here is a feeling which has never been able to flow in him, which is experienced with immediacy in this moment. It is a feeling which flows to its full result without inhibition. It is experienced acceptantly, with no attempt to push it to one side or to deny it. There is a quality of living subjectively in the experience, not feeling about it. The client, in his words, may withdraw from the experience to feel about it, as in the above example, yet the recording makes it clear that his words are peripheral to the experiencing which is going on within him and in which he is living. The best communication of this is in his words, oof. That's another strange one. And so let's end here today. Thank you again for joining me. We will start next time with self as an object tends to disappear on page 147. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you again.